So I'm Robert Vamosi, and I'm CISSP, which gives me the credit of being an expert. I'm also a security analyst for the Makana Corporation, which is a device security company out of San Francisco. As we just found out, I'm the author of When Gadgets Betray Us, and I'm also in a movie documentary about hacking called Code 2600, which is now available from Amazon. And I'm also a graduate of Northwestern University, so it's great to be back home in Chicago and to be here at Chicago Ideas Week with all of you. Thank you. So I'm going to talk on a subject that's a little bit different than what Cole and Parmi set up. And still going to talk about privacy, but I'm going to approach it from the Internet of Things, which is this idea that all these gadgets that we have are being connected to each other and to the Internet, and what those consequences might be. I see it as a new playground for digital thieves. So with every new technology, you're always going to have this trade-off between security and convenience. You want the cool factor, but what are you giving up in the meantime? What sort of behavioral privacy might be collected by these new gadgets that are coming into our lives? We're in a time of great experimentation. If you think back 10 years ago when, say, Facebook was first around, people put their addresses and all sorts of personal information up there because they wanted to share with the world what was going on. And then we realized, ooh, bad idea. Let's backtrack on that. No, don't want to do that anymore. What's going on passively with a lot of the gadgets that we own? What's being collected that we're not really thinking about yet? So there are some gadgets that are designed to collect data, and it's important, life critical. So I'm talking about medical devices. And certainly there's a convenience factor. If you live in rural North Dakota and you don't want to drive 4 hours to have that medical practitioner adjust something in your medical device, you can do it over the Internet. That's great. That's more time with your grandkids. That's more time that you could live and not be in transit doing something. But how secure are those devices? There was a researcher, Barnaby Jack, and he looked into insulin pumps. He's one of the first researchers to actually look at the security of an insulin pump. And also he contributed to the knowledge of what's going on with heart defibrillators. And what he found was basically they were not protected. They were not designed to be protected from the Internet, yet they were being connected to the Internet. And unfortunately he died in July, a week before he was to present at Black Hat and DEF CON, two premier security events in this country. But he did have an opportunity before he died to work with the medical device manufacturers, and hopefully his legacy will be that those manufacturers start including more security to make those devices resilient to pranksters who may want to throw a pacemaker into a rhythmic state and potentially damage someone's heart. My company, the Makana Corporation, in 2010 did a pen test on commercially available digital TVs in 2010. And what they found was the data that's being collected on these TVs were stored in the clear. Data at rest was in the clear, and data in transit was also being transmitted in the clear. So there was no encryption going on. Now you might say, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, if you subscribe to a service like, say, Netflix, now your username and password is available to someone who can go along the Internet and look for the signature of your digital TV and go in and now take your service and start watching shows that you're watching. And that's theft of service. Maybe not a big deal to you, but we're going to see other examples of gadgets that connect to the Internet that also leak information, and the consequences get more and more severe. So back in 2009, the government put an incentive in front of a lot of the utility companies and said, roll these out. Make sure every home and business has a smart meter. My concern with that was, hey, do we bother to test these devices before we rolled them out? No, we just rolled them out. They're out there, and every home and every business now has those smart meters in them. And, well, did we look at the basic security of them? Did we find out what's being collected? And I guess further extension of that is, now that they're out there, what can we do with that data that's being collected? I think that's what's really interesting about these gadgets when they connect to the Internet is we think of the convenience of immediately having access to them. But 5 years from now, what can be done with the data? 10 years from now, what can be done with the data? It's kind of interesting. So the bottom part of this slide is what you see from a smart meter. Every 20 seconds, sometimes as often as 2 seconds, it pulses out some data about your energy usage in your home. And the idea is that as a homeowner or a business, you can look to see, oh wow, that refrigerator is really not efficient. I should replace it with something that's more energy efficient. And so you see some steady blocks there, which is something like an air conditioner going on and off periodically. And then you see these valleys when it's the evening, or maybe the person's away from home and wisely turning off their AC while they're gone. Well, there's some jagged peaks in there, and what's interesting about those peaks is that researchers have now delved in and found that digital TVs emit particular signatures. And not only that, when they're watching particular TV shows. And so the researchers can actually say, with maybe 80% accuracy, what you were watching just based on your power usage. Wow, who knew? Now, as I said before, a lot of these devices don't protect data at rest. They don't protect data in motion. And so some German hackers had some fun with it. And the top chart is an example of that, where they manipulated the readings from a smart meter that would display on the graph. And if you can't see it, what they're saying there is, you have been hacked. Now, you can have some fun and games. You can lower your energy usage at home. And the neighbor that's causing you a lot of problems, you can raise their energy usage so they get billed more in the future. So we're currently exhausting all of the IP addresses, internet addresses for IPv4. And we're now transitioning to something called IPv6. To give you an idea of how many more addresses it is, someone once explained to me that consider all the grains of sand on all the beaches of the world. That's how many addresses will be available under IPv6. So of course, gadgets are going to start to use it. And one company has already rolled out light bulbs that are using IPv6 addresses. They even have their own internet protocol. And this is great because you can use an app and you can regulate the luminosity or the hue of individual light bulbs in your home. It's also an opportunity for somebody to eavesdrop because it's not very well protected from lurkers. So I can know when you're home and when you're not, and maybe I just want to know your preferences of lighting in your home. We go further with that. If we've got so many IP addresses out there, we're going to connect everything, including toasters. What could possibly go wrong? So I'm talking about, in my book, a lot of different gadgets that we have around the home that we may not even think about as connecting to the internet. New digital cameras now have that capability. They have their own web server. They have their own internet address. And what can be done with that? Well, a couple things. Researchers have already scanned the internet and identified these particular cameras. And in some cases, they were able to go into the cameras, go into the SD card, and take those photographs off of the card. So you're thinking, great. Someone's got pictures of my puppy running around my living room. No big deal. Well, actually, it is a big deal because the digital file format that's being used collects longitude and latitude, location data, and puts it in that photograph. So if I get a bunch of photographs from you, I can start to trace your behavior. I can plot on a map where you live, most likely where you work, what parks you like to go to, what activities you engage in, just based on the photographs that I have taken off of your camera. Now, I don't even have to go to your camera. I can go to some websites and actually pull down photographs because a lot of the mobile phones, by default, still track location data. But you can turn that off. So good news on that. But you may not have thought of that before. So let's leave the home and take a walk. In London recently, the company that makes digital displays on the side of the garbage cans decided they wanted to go a step further. And they wanted to start collecting data about the people that pass by these particular garbage cans. And so they started collecting what's called the MAC address. Every device that we have has a MAC address. The first couple digits of the MAC address identify the manufacturer, and the last couple digits are a unique identifier. Now, this isn't going to tell you who is walking by the garbage can, but it's going to start to build a profile. You know that every day at 12 o'clock, Samsung, whatever that number is, walks by this particular garbage can, and oh, hey, there's another garbage can down the block that also picked up that same signature 2 minutes later. And so we can start to get a path. We can also figure out how fast that person's walking. We collect a lot of random data without really knowing who that person is. What are we going to do with this data? I don't know. But it's good to be aware that this type of data is being collected, and good to know that people like the mayor of London quickly shut this down once he found out that this was going on in the city. There are conveniences in having the dashboard navigation, certainly. Not knowing where you're going. I opened my book with a case of a woman who got lost in England, and the consequences were that she basically didn't know she was on a railroad track, and the train ended up destroying her car. She's okay, but the car was totally destroyed. More of that in the book. But there's a company, TomTom, in 2011 that actually used the data that it was collecting from its navigation devices and handed it over to the Dutch police. They could tell by how fast you got to a destination how fast you were going. And so we had virtual speed traps. They publicly apologized and said they would never, ever do that again. But think about that the next time you use Siri or Google Now or some other navigation service. They have an idea of how far it is from point A to point B. And if you suddenly get to point B faster than expected, you can infer that you were probably speeding to get there. Now, the things that go on in your car are being recorded. From 2001 forward, cars in the United States have had black boxes in them. Black boxes actually exist further back in time, back in the 1970s, when airbags first came out. The engineers used the black boxes to reconstruct what was happening. And if you remember, in the 1970s, people died because of the early airbags. They didn't quite understand how to do that. So black boxes are now in every single car, and as of 2012, the owner's manuals have to declare that this is the case. And in 2014, the NSTB has now said that you need to have 40 pieces of data collected by the typical black box. This includes things like, were you wearing a seatbelt at the time of the accident? Did you have your turn indicator on? Did you have your lights on? Did you have the stereo on? How loud was the music playing in the car at the time of the crash? That type of data is now being recorded. So that's something to think about the next time you're driving, that you're being watched, whether you want to or not. So what can you do? You can't really stop data collection, but you can minimize it. You can turn off unnecessary settings in the device configuration. Examples would be, my data plan is pretty liberal, so I turn off Wi-Fi. Why let my mobile phone connect to a random public network when I can go through the carrier? I feel a little more secure about that. That's just me. Turn off geolocation and photographs, as I indicated before. Obfuscate. If you're really paranoid, don't take the same path every day to work. Shake it up a little. Go a different route. You know, the device is being tracked. Maybe they'll think different people are doing that. Turn off your devices occasionally. Maybe not use technology so much. I don't know about you, but I love technology, and I'm really not going to start doing that. But what I do recommend, my takeaway is, think about what the device might be collecting and learn to live with it. Be comfortable with what you're using. And if you don't like it, push back. Don't buy that device. Don't use that technology. Just push back a little bit, and maybe we'll start to see some changes. Remember, the gadgets don't control us. We control them. Thank you very much.